One of the weirdest places for me in Morrowind is right here. Check it out. It's an abandoned ruined building sitting on a small peninsula right next to some Daedric ruins. Inside you won't find any furniture or items scattered around, no NPCs connected to it, and not even a quest that leads you here. At least not that I know of. And do you know what's the weirdest thing about it? The architecture, just look at it. It doesn't really match any of the main styles we see in Morrowind. It's not Telvanni, not Redoran, not Hlalo, though it may at first look quite similar. And this place is actually one of many strange abandoned locations scattered across Vvardenfell. Today I want to show you the ones I think are the weirdest. Each of these places adds something to the world building. While you're traveling through Morrowind, they constantly make you stop and ask questions like, what is this place? Who lived here? And why was it abandoned? If you look around carefully at all of these places, think and do a bit of research, you can come up with some cool theories. I've come up with quite a few interesting ones myself and I want to share them. And there is one location in particular that completely blew my mind. It hides a pretty terrifying story behind it. It's really crazy how much you can discover just by digging a little deeper in games like Morrowind. But yeah, we'll get to that one a bit later. The first place I want to show you is right here. It's a small island located in the Westgash region, not far from the settlement of Kul. What's strange about this place is that there's a camp set up in a beautiful spot right next to a waterfall with the fire still burning, but there's nobody around. Now, if the fire is still burning, someone must have made it fairly recently, right? Otherwise, all we'd see are ashes. And that's not all. There's a plate, a small bowl, and some cutlery lying around. It looks like someone either had a meal here not long ago or was about to prepare one. There's no food in the camp though, so maybe whoever lived here went out to get some. There's also a fishing rod in the camp, so maybe someone went fishing. Although, if that were the case, why leave the rod behind? Unless, of course, whoever lives here owns more than one. So I searched the entire island. I even checked the water around it. I found nothing. No clues, not even a body. So it's not like someone went for a swim and drowned. Though technically, slaughterfish could have just gotten rid of any evidence, right? But you know what really caught my attention? The lack of any boat. If someone is living on an island like this, they had to get here somehow, right? Sure, you could swim, but I don't think many people in Morrowind would choose that option. The waters are full of slaughterfish and they are incredibly aggressive. One possibility is that this person was part of a shipwreck and got washed ashore. But honestly, I don't think it's very likely. And if that happened, I imagine they would eventually risk swimming to Kul despite the slaughterfish. Living on a tiny island with no source of fresh water isn't exactly a long-term survival plan. Or actually, hold on. There is a waterfall here, so maybe fresh water wouldn't be an issue after all. But would you really want to spend the rest of your life on this tiny island? I know I wouldn't. I'd probably try to swim to Kul, or at least start yelling and hope someone from Kul hears me and comes to help. And to be fair, if someone got stranded here after their ship wrecked, having a bedroll and a chest doesn't really make sense. It feels like way too much luck for things like that to also wash ashore. The camp looks a little too organized. It feels more like someone brought these things here intentionally rather than ending up here by accident. Okay, so if we assume someone had a boat, then they probably just swam somewhere, right? Kul is nearby, so maybe they just went shopping? But judging by the fact that they left money in a sack, I have a feeling they usually get their food in a different way, like stealing. And let's be honest, what can you really buy for 5 septims? So I guess someone here is actually a thief. The items we find in the camp, like an expensive ring, might back this theory up. And there's one item that's definitely a real treasure, the Pilgrim's Lantern. This lantern stays lit for 32 years in-game, which makes it a fairly unique item. That raises a question. Is our mysterious island resident really just a random traveler? Because this isn't the kind of thing you'd normally find lying around. There's a high chance it was stolen. So I think this whole camp is a thief's hideout. And what's funny is that while they are away, you can basically steal everything they own. Looks like karma pays back. So what do you think about this place? Do you have any theories of your own? If we could find some notes here, maybe it would be easier to figure out who lived here or what happened to this person. And yes, the abandoned place I'm the most excited about actually has a book that reveals a pretty brutal story. But first, I want to show you 2 more locations. The first one is a place that many of you like to use as a base. Yes, I'm talking about the abandoned apartment in Vivec in one of the cantons. Isn't that place weird? It's actually a really nice looking apartment in the biggest biggest city on the Vvardenfell island, with a comfy bed, a chest, a wardrobe, and a few other pieces of furniture as well. It's definitely comfortable enough to live in, right? So why does nobody live here? Of course, the simple answer might be that the devs just left it there so we could have a place to store our things legally. But honestly, that explanation isn't enough for me, so I looked around a bit more and found this book. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I had to look for it for a long time. It's lying on a table, clearly visible as you walk inside. The book is tied to the worship of the god Vivek, and it might suggest that someone actually lived here at some point, right? If someone kept a religious text like this around, it probably means they weren't just passing through. This feels more like a long-term home. So what happened to that person? My first theory is that it was a very religious person who went on a pilgrimage of the 7 graces and still hasn't come back, or something bad happened to them along the way. Another theory is that they left the apartment because right next to it there's another one with an ancestor ghost inside. Maybe that ghost also haunts this apartment from time to time. Haunts it. Haunts. Maybe that ghost also haunts this apartment from time to time. Or maybe someone couldn't sleep because of the noises the ghost makes and eventually decided to leave. So what do you think is the story behind this place? Okay, now let's go back to the location I showed you at the very start. Yes, this ruined building. Or actually these 2 ruined buildings. They are weird for 2 reasons. The first one is the architectural style. It doesn't really match any of the styles we see elsewhere in the game. It's pretty close to Hlalu, but not quite. The shape is just a simple rectangle with none of the extra details we usually see. The color is different and there are no small stairs in front of the door, which most Hlalu buildings have. Not to mention the wooden locks. What's funny is that I was sure Hlalu buildings didn't have them at all. But it turns out they do, although only on some buildings, usually on the 2nd floor and only on one side. Here though, we have them on both sides of the building, running all the way across in a very regular pattern. I even tried looking it up on the internet, and some people say it's Velotti style, but I'm not so sure about that. All the Velotti towers, as well as cities like Vivek and Molagmar, are built in the Velotti style, and I just don't see the resemblance. Velotti architecture is inspired by Mesopotamian architecture. The cantons of Vivek, for example, resemble ziggurats, which are massive step structures with flat tops and sloping sides. This inspiration is clearly visible. Just check it out. The ruins we find in the West Gash region, on the other hand, feel much closer to Pueblo-style adobe buildings. What's interesting is that Hlalu architecture almost feels like a combination of both. The houses share some similarities with Pueblo architecture, while some of the towers resemble Mesopotamian windcatchers. Just look at how similar they are. It's really cool how many real-world influences we can find in Morrowind. Okay, but my question is, who did these buildings belong to? We can probably cross the great houses of the list, although one theory could be that these are some very old Hlalu-style buildings. But I checked the IDs of the building pieces and they simply say ruin. Buildings that belong to the great houses usually include the house name in their IDs. Well, maybe not Telvanni, but let's be honest, you can't really mistake a Telvanni building for anything else. So let's assume these ruins aren't connected to any of the great houses. Okay, but do you know what the second strange thing about this place is? Its location. The houses are built on a small peninsula with no clear path connecting them to the rest of Vvardenfell. You would have to travel through water or over pretty steep and uneven terrain, and neither option seems ideal if you're trying to transport building materials or even just live here comfortably. So what was this place anyway? Was it a small village? A settlement? Or just a couple of houses? Were these buildings once complete and later fell into ruin? Or was construction never finished with nobody ever living here at all? One theory I came up with is that these houses may have belonged to people who worship the Daedric princes. That would explain why they were built here near Daedric ruins, and maybe it would also explain the unusual architectural style. So maybe the people who lived here weren't really connected to any of the great houses at all. Maybe they wanted their own identity, their own community, and their own style of building. Of course, that's just a theory. Interestingly, we can find a few more ruined buildings like these near Kogorun, the stronghold of the 6th house. So maybe these structures really are connected to a different group of worshippers. Oh, and near the ruined buildings in the West Gash region, we have some bandits nearby, but if they were connected to these buildings, I think they would have their camp closer to them or even inside. inside. I know there is no roof, but being surrounded by walls would at least give some protection from the wind. Okay, so are you ready to see the abandoned place with a terrifying story behind it? It's located right here on a small island in the Bitter Coast region. It's an abandoned shack. And remember that island with the pilgrim's lantern? There was no boat, so we could assume the owner left to do something. But here, the boat is actually still here, and there's no person to be found. Of course, someone could have had two boats for some reason, but let's assume they only had one. If that's the case, it could mean that the person who lived here never actually left this little island, right? So I looked around and found an exclusive potion of shadow hidden in a tree stump along with some gold. That's something that feels pretty odd, because who would need to become partially invisible on an isolated island like this, right? Maybe whoever lived here was using potions like this for some shady business on the Vvardenfell island. Who knows? Anyway, I didn't find a body on the island or in the water, so I checked the shack itself. And what I found there gave me goosebumps once I figured out what it is. Inside, besides a complete mess, you can find a strange book. There isn't much to read inside, but the text in square brackets felt really strange to me. It looks like the words Botak have been scribbled in the margin. To be honest, I didn't know what that meant at first, so I googled it, and it turns out it might be a reference to a rock star Kurt Cobain, who apparently in his teenage years painted the same words on a neighbor's boat. Of course without their permission. And the book lies right next to a lute. And I'd say the lute is the closest instrument we can find in Morrowind to a guitar, right? And Kurt Cobain was primarily a vocalist, but he also played the guitar. So I don't think it's a coincidence that a lute is lying here. We can even find one more instrument here, drums, and from what I checked, Kurt also played the drums. And do you know what happened to Kurt? He ended his own life. Is this a hint left here to suggest what happened to the owner of the shack? Maybe that's why the boat is still here. Maybe someone just went into the water to drown, and the slaughterfish got rid of any evidence which could explain why we can't find a body. By the way, near the shack there is also a wrecked ship. I checked if there was any Botak writing on its sides, but found nothing. A detail like that could have made this whole place even creepier. And what's interesting is that according to the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, there should also be a worn note in this shack. But strangely, I couldn't find it. I checked every corner of the hut and the island several times, but nothing. I'm not sure if it's a bug or if I just missed it, but this note adds even more to the story. The note describes someone feeling detached from life and reality. The writer recalls a time when everything felt vivid and real, but now describes a growing sense of numbness and exhaustion. Over time, that feeling turns into emotional distance and emptiness. That sounds almost like a final message left behind to explain how bad this person felt. And that note really supports my sad theory about what happened to the owner of the shack. So maybe someone moved to this isolated island to find purpose in life again, but never did. So yes, this abandoned spot out of all the locations I've shown hides the most terrifying story. Can you think of any other places like this? Hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, thanks for watching.